Coming up next on Access Framingham TV, my guest, Framingham resident, attorney Chris Petrini, shares with us the realization of his long-held dream, a trek in the mountains of Nepal. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome to Travels with Jack. I'm your host, Jack Barron, and as always, I remind our audience, if you'd like to be a guest here with me on Access Framingham Television to talk about a recent trip, we would love to have you. Just contact the folks here at Access Framingham TV, let them know you're interested in being a guest on Travels with Jack, and someone from our crew will give you a call and make arrangements. And today, I want to introduce to you our guest, Chris Petrini, who is a longtime Framingham resident. He is also currently the town council for Framingham and has been since 2001. If you need a lawyer, he also runs a private practice here in Framingham. And Chris is married to Julie, where he met her in law school at Duke University down south. They have two children together, a son who just returned from serving in Iraq with a Army 1st Armored Division. Right. And we salute him and thank him. And a daughter who's a senior in high school and getting ready to go off to college. So Julie may want to go with you on a trip again.
Not this one, I promise.
Not this one. So tell us a little bit about Nepal. You had a dream to go there. Share with our audience, if you would, this dream and the reality of getting there. Sure. And getting back.
Okay. Well, Nepal, as many people know, has many of the highest mountains in the world. 10 of the 14 highest mountains in the world are in Nepal, including the most famous one, Mount Everest, but several other mountains as well. And I've always wanted to go there. I'm a lover of the outdoors. I like to hike and see beautiful things in nature and just to be outside and away from work and the daily pressures of life. And so many years ago, when I was working out in New Mexico, I worked at a place called Philmont Scout Ranch, which is a high adventure area for Boy Scouts. And that summer, I read a lot of mountaineering books and things about conquests of Everest and different things like that. So I decided that I'd like to someday go hike in what they call the rooftop of the world, Nepal. So I did.
Okay, and did you find a travel agent to book this, or how did you decide, or how did you put it together, how you were going to get going?
What I did was we actually, I had some friends who knew other people who were in the Peace Corps, and I wanted to go with not so much a formal tour, but to be a little bit more independent and localized. And so that's what I did. I focused on that. And a couple of a friend of a friend was in the Peace Corps and knew a Sherpa who had guided these tours, who used to work for a larger tour agency but had his own small business.
Okay.
So I got in contact with him by email, and we had negotiations over email. And I was talking to two Sherpas, and we ended up choosing this particular Sherpa to hike around what they call the Annapurna circuit, which is known in Backpacker magazine and other locations as the best hike, the most famous best hike in the world.
Okay.
Yep.
And you got your tickets.
Yes.
Got on a airline, flew to.
It took 30 hours door to door to get from my home in Framingham to Kathmandu, and we flew from Boston to Hong Kong. We had about a 3-hour. That was about a 16-hour flight. We actually went from Boston to New York. We waited about 2 hours. Then we took a flight from New York to Hong Kong, and waited in Hong Kong for about 3 hours. The Hong Kong flight was about 16, 17 hours in the air. Then we went to Kathmandu with a stop in Jakarta, Bangladesh, which is the capital of Bangladesh. So we actually stopped in Bangladesh on the way to Kathmandu. And I remember we got to the airport and it was raining cats and dogs, very hard rain. And the airport had actually been closed, so we were lucky to land because it was a major air accident. About 20 people died.
That's what you always want to hear.
Exactly. So we made it in about 30 hours of travel. We made it into Kathmandu.
And you get to Kathmandu, and did they put you in the brand new Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton hotel there?
Not exactly. We stayed in local hotels. We were met by our Sherpas, and one of the things that was amazing when we got off the airplane, there was the thing that was most striking. You're in an airplane, you're kind of jet lagged anyway, and it was like masses of humanity wanting to give you rides, loan you umbrellas, help carry your luggage, and all for a fee or whatever. And it was a pretty shocking experience. But
you mean capitalism was in action?
Absolutely, absolutely. But the hundreds of people there, we were luckily, our Sherpa met us at the airport and got us into our hotel. We stayed at a hotel called the Annapurna Temple Guest House, which was recommended, and it used to be literally a temple. So we stayed in Kathmandu for a couple nights before we hit the trail.
So. And I assume you went to sleep.
I tried to go to sleep, but I was jet lagged. But we were able to sleep some. But yes.
Okay, yeah. So you finish up your hotel, you get ready with the Sherpas, and explain to me how they take you. Did you go with animals, or I've never been on this kind of trip. Give me a little idea of how they load up your equipment. Do they put you in Jeeps, or how do you travel?
What we did is we had about a 5-hour Jeep ride from the capital city of Kathmandu to basically the beginning of the Annapurna circuit. It's called a town called Besibar, I think is the name of it. But it was a crazy drive through mountainous roads going for hours with some unusual traffic patterns and unusual traffic movements.
Okay.
But that was touch and go on the road, but it was kind of interesting. And basically after a 5-hour Jeep ride, we were dropped off at the trailhead. And then we were with one Sherpa and one guide. The Sherpa was the guide, and then we had one, what they call a porter, a guy who was helping to carry our bags.
So you had quite a crew with you.
And one other guy from Framingham, John Bottini, and myself. So we were a group of 4 people.
Okay, and how did they carry? You carried everything on backpacks, or
yes.
do you have an animal with you? Or
some of the larger treks do have animals,
okay.
and if you're camping out, you do have usually it's donkeys or mules. But we took what they call to be a tea house trek. In other words, we stayed in these what they call tea houses. They're basically hostels or rudimentary lodges every night.
Oh, you mean as you go up the mountain, there are preset places to stay? You didn't put up a tent and call it a day?
It depended. You could do it that way, but we did the tea house trek. And
what do they do for lazy people like me? Do they have hotels all there also?
Well, the lazy people probably wouldn't be on this trek.
Okay,
so,
all right. There you go, audience. I'm not going.
You sound like my wife. She doesn't want to go either. So,
so you get going. You're climbing. You're hiking. How were the trails? Were they preset? Were they hard?
The first few days, it was quite an amazing thing because we started at 2,000 feet elevation, and then we went all the way up to 18,000 feet as our height. And so as it started, we were hiking basically through jungle areas. There were lots of rice fields, paddies. There were kids all the way, schools and that type of thing. But as you got higher, the topography and the ecosystems would change. And as you got higher, there were fewer and fewer plants and that type of thing. So
you did see a distinct difference.
Yeah, probably 3 or 4 eco zones, I felt. Different types of trees, different types of fauna, animals.
Was it harder for you as you get higher? Is it harder to climb and walk because of the change of oxygen? Or?
Yes, it is. The highest I'd ever been before going to Nepal was about 12,000 feet.
Okay.
And this particular trip, I was up to almost 18,000 feet. And I noticed I was doing pretty well till around 15,000 feet. And then I started to feel a little lousy, but I still kept going. But I mean, I was, and as you got higher, what you would do is you would tend to hike less. In other words, you wouldn't do an 10-mile hike. They would adjust your hike because of your high altitude. You might do a 4 or 5 mile hike, which would be sufficient that day because you're gaining major altitude also. So.
Oh, so they do adjust you to take into consideration the air and the oxygen content up there.
Definitely, yeah, they have to. because you have to get used to it. The human body isn't really made to be that high for long periods of time. I actually went to a museum at the end of the trek. It's called the International Mountaineering Museum, and they said at 18,000 feet, it's 50% of the oxygen that you would have at the ground level. So.
Before we get to pictures, which should be coming shortly, squeeze in and tell me a little bit about the food, because I'm always interested in food.
The food, as I mentioned off air, was a bit choppy. I wouldn't call it fine cuisine. It tended to be lentils and rice. They called it dal bhat, was the name of the staple meal, which is basically rice and kind of a soupy type of lentil soup. I didn't go to Nepal for its cuisine. Let me describe it that way. And plus it was being cooked in these tea houses as we were going along that didn't always follow the same, necessarily follow the same strict hygiene methods that we might follow. So it was a little bit challenging at times, the food, but we got through it.
You got through it. Okay.
Absolutely.
And did you feel this meal gave you enough energy to keep rolling along? Sounds kind of like a vegetarian diet.
It is. I mean, you could get meat. I had meat probably early on the first couple of times, but then I decided to stick to the vegetarian after I went into it for a couple of days.
And you lost weight on the trip?
I lost about 10 pounds, and I lost about 10, 15 pounds before I went. So I got off the trail. I was less than 170 pounds, which I haven't been since college.
Really? So this was definitely a therapeutic diet trip as well as general hiking?
Correct.
Okay.
It was a spa trip on steroids.
So that. Now, so what do? This is. Share with me this picture, and if you'll forgive me, start explaining some of these shots as best you can.
This is Chris Petrini. Welcome to my video, Trekking in Nepal, a 50-year spiritual journey. As a young man, I was a Philmont Ranger in New Mexico. Back then, I made a promise to myself. God willing, I would someday hike in the Himalayas. I would climb some of the world's greatest mountains until I reached the rooftop of the world. When I guided scouts as a ranger in 1981, I often left them with a quote from Robert Perssig's momentous book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. At the time, I hoped the quote would mean something to those scouts, but I had no idea what those words would eventually come to mean to me. Perssig's quote is as follows: "Mountains should be climbed with as little effort as possible and without desire. The reality of your own nature should determine the speed. If you become restless, speed up. If you become winded, slow down. You climb the mountains in an equilibrium between restlessness and exhaustion. Then when you're no longer thinking ahead, each footstep isn't just a means to an end, but a unique event in itself. This leaf has jagged edges. This rock looks loose. From this place the snow is less visible, even though closer. These are things you should notice anyway. To live only for some future goal is shallow. It's the side of the mountains which sustain life, not the top. Here's where things grow." I finally learned the meaning of those words during my visit to Nepal in 2011. My 150-mile trek to altitudes of 18,000 feet on the Annapurna circuit brought me to the same rooftop of the world I had dreamed about 30 years earlier. On particularly difficult trails, my Sherpa would gently remind me, "Bistari, Bistari," which means in Nepali, slowly, slowly. My journey helped me understand that no goal is out of reach. You can ascend to any height if you follow 3 simple steps. First, take your time. Second, never force yourself out of breath. And third, always stay within yourself. With this lesson, you can climb any mountain. Nothing, not the majestic peaks of Nepal, nor the difficult trek of life's challenges, is insurmountable. All you must do is remember, Bistari, Bistari, slowly, slowly.
Till I die, meet you on the other side.
Wow, those shots are just unbelievable. Now, is this, in fact, Mount Everest or no?
No, that there is the Annapurna range, they call it. So Annapurna, this trek we did is called the Annapurna Circuit. It's the 10th highest mountain in the world.
And this is
that's in Kathmandu. They're showing some shots, and that's in Pokhara. This beginning of these photos are kind of a montage of different parts of the trek. And then as we go on, it'll start to be more chronological. So this is the beginning of it. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those shots are breathtaking.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It was a beautiful journey. It really was. It was amazing.
Now, let me return to, so you get to the top of your 18,000 feet.
Yes.
And then what do they tell you? Now you go back, or do they have a Hindu ceremony, or?
Well, you'll probably see in these pictures when they show, there's a picture you take in front of at the summit of this, it's called Thorong La. It's a pass. It's 18,000. There were higher mountains all around us, like up to 24,000, 25,000 feet.
And do people go to those too?
Yeah, but there you need more, like, that's Annapurna too, by the way. That's part of this range, and you see the clouds to the right. That's part of a snow avalanche that was coming off the mountain that same day.
You have a little avalanche too while you're up there walking.
Exactly.
Oh, terrific. This is for me, folks.
I know, it's crazy. It really was.
Oh, I see. So you're exhausted from the climb. You have no air.
Right.
You did 4 miles, and then they tell you an avalanche is coming. Okay.
So this is probably day 5. That's like the Annapurna range. So anyway, Annapurna is the 10th highest mountain in the world. So this trek, we hiked around 2 of the 10 highest mountains in the world. Annapurna, this picture, and also Dhaulagiri, which is the 7th highest mountain in the world. So Everest was in a different region of Nepal. Everest is to the east. The Annapurna mountain range is in central Nepal.
Now, Everest borders on Tibet, or not really?
No, Everest does. It borders on Tibet to the north, and so do these. This is very close to Tibet too.
Did they give you any warnings about Tibet and the laws are different, or any kind of information? Or when you originally researched the trip, were you told Tibet may not be as friendly to you as Nepal, or?
It's definitely, access is a lot harder to get into Tibet. The Chinese control Tibet, and even to this day, my Sherpa was a Tibetan Buddhist actually, and he wouldn't say much, but when he did speak, it was obvious that there was still tension between China and Tibet. But you could actually trek in Tibet, but it's much harder to get a permit. You actually have to pay $500 of U.S.
Oh, it's a profit center.
Absolutely, it's a profit center for the Chinese government. But they control.
Doesn't it amaze you how those communists, they always seem to find a good profit center out of the Westerners?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Oh, so they get a high permit fee.
And that's how they control access.
And did they charge you a fee in Nepal?
Yes, but it was much smaller. It was probably, I don't know, $25 or $50.
Oh, that is quite a spread.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And were you told that the Sherpas and the staff would be more expensive also in Tibet?
I think that, yes, I think it's harder because they have to provide for them, and that you have to pay for their permits, or at least a portion thereof.
Oh, so it's a whole different...
It's a different experience. It's a different price point. But
it looks like the same snow and the same climbing.
It's similar. It's a little bit more remote, but there's still some of the same beautiful mountains that I saw. So I was pleased to do this. This was plenty for me.
Now, this mountain looks very high, yet I see no snow on it, the one closest.
That's because we're hiking up that river valley. That's probably about 13,000, 14,000 feet, but it's only when you got up to 17, 18, 16, 18 you started to see more of the snow.
Oh, really?
Because I was there in October, so I was there kind of at the end of the summer, beginning of the winter.
Is there a particular window that they suggested to you that you should make this trip? In other words, go ahead, tell me.
And that is basically, we actually had excellent weather. We were on the trail for 18 days. The first 3 or 4 days were a bit cloudy and stormy, rainy, but then from day 5 to the end, it was beautiful, sunny. And if you have to go in either October or April. If you go anytime other than that, you're in danger of the monsoons.
Oh, not the avalanches, not the snow avalanches.
Not the snow avalanches.
Monsoons,
okay, exactly.
So the monsoons are there also.
They're there, but you want to avoid that because then you get socked in. You can't see anything. So.
Okay.
In fact, I was talking to a trekker who had been previously hiking the last couple of...
This is definitely a difficult trip for me, I can tell you.
I was talking to one guy who was hiking before me, and he was hiking this similar route to me, but he went 2 weeks before, didn't see a thing because it was raining the whole time. Really? So because it was still it was at the end of the monsoon. So.
Oh, he didn't do his homework.
Well, some people like to hike in the monsoon, but I prefer to see the mountains. If
really?
I'm going
what is the advantage of hiking in the monsoon?
It's more solitary. It's more of a hotter experience, Jack, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. So. All right. So this is the Bulbule to
Nagati.
All right, fill me in.
So this is the first day. Now this video is going to start to show pictures from the beginning of my trek to the end. And that's my friend John Bottini.
How did his health hold up?
His health was okay.
Okay.
He got a little ill at points too, but in general, we both were all right. And you can see I put this video together with some different quotes, philosophy quotes.
Yep.
It was kind of my spiritual journey. That's what I called it.
Well, it does. It looks spiritual.
It is indeed.
It looks, I mean, you can't question it's very beautiful.
No question. So as you can see at the beginning, this is when we're about 2,000, 3,000 feet. You can see the rice paddies around. It's very green. There's kids playing soccer in this picture. But as you go up, you'll see the topography start to change. There's my friend John Bottini I mentioned. He's a Framingham resident, and he was on this amazing journey with me. And this is a river that we were hiking along all the way up the valley to 18,000 feet. They call it the Masi Gandhi River. Okay. And it's the river you had to cross these very scary suspension bridges about 20 times. And the thing about the suspension bridges is that it was scary. They were swaying over this crazy, raging river that if you fell in, you didn't think you could live. So that was pretty amazing. But this is some of the quotes.
I assume at least the water was good.
The water was good, but we purified it.
Oh, you did have to really?
Did. Just to be safe. Now here, this is an interesting picture because you can see the guy is bringing the sheep down from Tibet to market. So we were actually hiking on old trading routes that they used to have. They used to sell salt. Now they bring livestock. You can see how they get all the stuff up to the mountain. That's like kerosene. They don't have no real trucks to speak of. Everything is done by donkey or by on the back.
Okay, so they don't use Jeeps and things?
Very minimally. Okay. And see, this is right after the Bruins won the Stanley Cup, so I had my Bruins hat with me.
Okay.
And you can see the
rice
paddy, and is in Nepal. All the kids were nice. I'd asked them if they wanted to take the picture. The population was very gracious. Very nice. And there's the Masi Gandhi, and you can see we're starting to get higher. That's an example of what the people would carry it to the market, or coming to the market with the thing, or leaving with goods to bring back. There I am. That's probably about 5,000 feet. So now we're starting to work our way up.
You're smiling. You must be feeling good that
Exactly.
day.
And there I am crossing one of those bridges
I mentioned.
One of those bridges. Yeah. You can see the porter behind me. But it was a little dicey. And then you could see, and occasionally you'd have to get out of the way of there's our Sherpa. His name is Nawang. He was very nice.
And you were happy with him through the whole trip?
Definitely.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Very nice. So we're working our way up here, and it's very remote, but they have small villages. That's what was different. I expected more like the wilderness trek that you mentioned, that you'd be camping alone, but you'd be hiking through these ancient villages that had like temples and daily living. They'd be doing the crops, cooking dinner, and it made it interesting because you could see a lot of the culture at the same time. Now we're working our way up to Darapani. And you can see this is a hammer and sickle flag. If you're going to see it a little better, but there was a pretty big communist influence in Nepal. You'll see it in a couple of minutes. See the hammer and sickle. So some houses had the hammer and sickle to
So did they run what I'll call community farms? Or
Yes.
They did. So most of the farms were set up like communes.
It depended, like those who were following the communist philosophy. It wasn't an official government policy, but some of the people were definitely sympathetic to the communists and followed that way of life.
Okay.
It depended. But there was also classic family farms as well.
So a combination of both.
Correct.
Did you hear any conversation of anxiety between those two structures, the family farms versus the communal farms, or they all seem to get along pretty good?
I didn't see any direct evidence, but I noticed that as we were, where we were, this was known to be a more communist-oriented area. There was a period where people weren't really going into Nepal because of concerns about they had what they called the Maoists, but that has stopped. People are coming back. Now the Maoists are part of the government. They're actually like a minority, like maybe 15% vote, like I'm using the English system of the government. So.
Okay, and did you have any government problems as far as kidnappings or anything of that nature while you were there, or shortly before or after?
There were actually a few problems, actually. It was amazing. There were a couple of major assassinations before we left, and one of the assassinations
was this one of your clients you didn't win?
No, exactly. No. But it was
teasing, folks.
Every morning we'd get up and read something in the paper when we were in Kathmandu. Amazing stuff. One of the guys, this major Hindu leader, was supposedly executed or assassinated by a member of the prime minister's cabinet, and the guy refused to admit it. And when we were leaving the trail, and we got off the trail 21 days later, and he finally had to leave the government, but it took him 21 days where he was implicated in this assassination before he finally left the government. It was incredible.
See, and you thought being a selectman in Framingham was
Exactly. It puts it all into perspective, right? That's true.
What did they make these bridges out of? Were they rope or were they metal?
Most of them were metal. There were a couple that were rope. The ones that were really spanning the bridges were of better construction, thank God, and they were metal. But occasionally we go across some wooden ones too, but they tended to be smaller, closer to the ground.
Because I saw in one of your photos you had some horses or donkeys crossing. So I was wondering, I say they must be actually pretty stable.
They are. But one time I was crossing the bridge and, the herder brought like about 20 donkeys out in the middle, and I was out there in the middle of this crazy river, above this river with all these donkeys, and actually the Sherpa was very upset because sometimes the donkeys can buck and you could go into that river, and if you went into that river, you were done. There's no question about it. So that was very scary.
Did he tell you that you'd be done?
Well, he was very upset. He was yelling at the herder, so I figured it was a kind of an interesting moment, but I managed to just sneak by the donkeys and get off the bridge.
Did your wife take an extra insurance policy?
I actually had some. I had some evacuation insurance.
You did? Okay,
I
good.
did.
Folks, that's something to keep in mind, because when you do trips like this, it sometimes is a very smart thing to take some kind of insurance, medical, whatever, so that if you do have to be evacuated, you can get out, because a medical ambulance can be $24,000, $25,000.
Exactly. It's an excellent point. Where we were, they'd have to fly you out with the Nepali army, and it would cost like $20,000 to $30,000, and you'd have to pay.
Yeah,
so.
It's a lot of money.
Right. It's amazing.
So if you're planning this kind of trip, Chris probably is passing on some good information to you that you might want to look at some insurance.
And the insurance wasn't that much. It was less than $200. It was worth it.
Okay, now we're back on the
trail with some of my quotes that I put in my video. Now we're starting to work our way up, and you can see the topography change, and you see how there's less and less vegetation, or the vegetation that there is much lower. It's much more mountain tundra. This is all the reason why this is so deserty looking, is because the mountains are preventing the precipitation from coming over the mountains. That's why it's basically a desert climate at certain points we were hiking in. So we were that high.
So they don't have a lot of rain coming.
It depends where you are, but if you're blocked by the mountains, it causes desert erosion and that type of thing. Occasionally we'd see wild horses on the trail, but you can see how narrow the trail was, and you can see how deserty. It almost looks like the Grand Canyon or something.
Yes.
And that's up about 16,000 feet. It's getting, pretty high up there at this point. This is day 7. And this is the Annapurna Great Barrier. One of the reasons I went to Nepal this is a trek. I went to the place called Tilico Lake, which is the highest freshwater lake in the world. It's 16,000 feet, and it's shown on the slide here. And it's basically it's a glacier-fed lake, and the reason why I went there is because in mountaineering history, there's a book called Annapurna, which the French expedition, which summited this mountain we were going around, stayed at that lake for about 2 months. So it's very famous in mountaineering history. So I studied all that before I went, Jack.
Now, when you say a glacier-fed lake, so I'm going to assume as a layman that means it's very cold.
It is.
Were there fish in this lake?
That I don't know. I never found that out.
Okay.
But you can see the glacier. You can see the glacier calving into. That's a good picture because it shows how the lake is fed through the glacier melting. There's my friend John and I up at the 16,000-foot lake. So
the water looks beautiful.
It is.
I don't see anyone swimming or anything.
Right.
So.
And you see the red, white, and blue?
Yes.
That's called the French tricolor, because I mentioned the French stayed there. And it's a very famous, famous French area because that's where they stayed. So, there's a lot of respect for the French in this area of Nepal because they summited the mountain from there first time. So now after we did Tilico Lake Base Camp, we started to hike to go up even higher, believe it or not. And now we're going up to a place called Yak Karkar. And we saw our first yaks at around 15,000 feet.
And that's why they call it, because of the animal, the yak.
Exactly. And you'll see some yaks. There's our first yak. They're basically beasts of burden, but they only hang out at 12,000, 15,000 feet. They don't like to be in the lowlands.
And what do they do with the yaks? Do they cut their fur, or?
What they do is they're like oxen. They transport.
They do work.
They do work, and some of them are slaughtered for meat.
Oh.
I didn't eat any of it. But
you didn't want a yak kebab?
I'm all set. I think I'll stick to my
lentils.
Stick to my lentil and my curry.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't going to experience the yak. I like seeing them on the trail. That's what I liked. So.
Okay.
So as you can see, we're starting to get pretty high up now, and this is close to the highest, when you can see how snow-covered the mountains are. We're up around 16,000 feet now, and this is Himalayan blue sheep. This photo was actually taken about 300 feet away. Those are very rare sheep that we were able to see. We did not. The only thing that's rarer to see besides those sheep is the snow leopard. You've probably heard about the Himalayan snow leopard.
Yes,
we did not see the snow leopard. I saw him in a museum. That was it.
Oh, but the Himalayan sheep are also very unusual.
Very
so they
rare.
are not, I'm going to use the word domesticated. I don't know if that's the correct terminology for a wild animal that you farm and raise for their skins or the fur or whatever. No,
these are wild sheep that are
really?
very elusive, and they run in packs, and they're not trained or anything. They're not. They're not. Farmed in that way.
Did you find that high there were also communities that were set up with?
Definitely, there were still some communities, but they became smaller and smaller.
Okay.
And a lot of times they weren't year-round communities too.
Oh, really? Yeah. Seasonal.
They'd be up there in the summer, do some harvesting, some farming, then they'd come back down to the lowlands for the winter.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that was kind of a resort area then for the farmers.
Well, I wouldn't call it a resort area, but a subsistence farmer is probably closer to it. But yeah. So.
Oh my goodness.
But it was an incredible trip. It was just the way the fauna looked, the way the trees looked, the way the mountains looked. The colors were different, Jack. It's hard to explain, but you could tell you were in a different, you were hiking in Asia. And sometimes I had to pinch myself and say, I'm hiking, India's to the south, China's to the north. It was pretty amazing, so. And that's one of my quotes.
Mountaineer's foot. Now, that's not you.
That's in this video, I put different quotes in.
But I'm saying you did not have mountaineer's foot.
I still put one foot in front of the other. That's a self-portrait. I was up on this mini peak by myself.
What is mountaineer's foot?
Basically, he's teasing. You say mountaineer's foot is a reluctance to put one foot in front of the other.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah. And that's the height of the pass we were at. And you can see the mountains are very, this is the day before we got to our highest. I was feeling pretty ill there just from the elevation, I think. But you can see how high we're getting just from the way the mountains look. So.
Well, they continue. You had beautiful skies.
Yeah, we had great weather.
Yeah, it looks like you had great weather.
We did. From about day 4 in, the weather was awesome. It was great.
Now, this is a camp, I would say.
It's a camp, exactly. Now, we stayed at that camp before we went over Thorong La, and that's the 18,000 foot. And there we are at Thorong La Pass. That's the highest pass we were at. That's the 18,000.
Congratulations for the success. Okay.
Right, and you can see the Buddhist prayer flags. Whenever you got to somewhere high, you saw that at Tilico Lake. You'd see the Buddhist prayer flags. You see all the Buddhist prayer flags around that summit.
Okay, I'm not familiar with Buddhist prayer flags, but now I am.
Yeah.
So that is kind of a congratulating you.
Right, and it's also to pay homage to the pre-Buddhist and the pre-Hindu gods, like the old animist gods, so they don't get angry. It's very religious in nature in that respect. So they're paying homage to the old gods, really, but they still call it Buddhist prayer flags. Yeah.
And did they have where you needed to make a donation kind of thing?
Yeah, when you went into the temples and stuff, you would do that. So, and that's on the way down after this hike. I saw Mount Dhaulagiri, which is the 7th highest mountain in the world. And we were hiking down. You see those people in red?
They look like monks.
They're monks. They're doing a pilgrimage up to this mountain. I mean, it was very religious in nature. This city, Muktinath. When I hiked down from the high point to Muktinath, I basically banged both my toenails off because my boots were a little tight. It was just so rugged. We've dropped like 5,000 feet in one day. But Muktinath had all these religious shrines. This is called the 108 Fountain Shrine in Muktinath. It's a very religious city, and all the pilgrims come here. And so we stayed in this city. But you can see there's basically an African-American Buddha, they call him a black Buddha, that brought Buddhism to Tibet. And so he's very famous in this area, as well as Hindu rituals. So.
Isn't that interesting, though, that they would have the temples and everything even up there in these, very high elevations, very out of the way?
Absolutely. And what was amazing...
Did that surprise you?
It kind of did. I mean, the temples were everywhere, even at the highest elevations. And what I also was very impressed with is that there's very good religious tolerance between the Buddhists and the Hindus. It's not like some of the ethnic or religious conflicts that we sometimes see in other parts of the world. I thought that was a real plus, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you were Jesuit educated at Georgetown, so I assume going to these temples every day you were used to it.
I guess so, yeah. I respected it. I really did. I liked that part of it, to be honest with you. It was good.
Well, I think it probably ties in, spirituality with this kind of atmosphere, the beauty of it all, the solidarity, so to speak. I mean, it probably has it didn't surprise me that you showed a picture of monks going up there for a spiritual type of thing. It's probably a very spiritual setting.
It is indeed. I mean, when you get to something about the mountains, when you get to the highest places in the world, or high mountains, to me, it strips all the day-to-day worries, the day-to-day, what are we going to do next? Did you feel you were
with God?
I would say I would have to say.
I would say
yes. I would say I have to answer that question.
With you.
Yes. Yeah, it was amazing.
When you're up there like that, and the mountains are beautiful, and everything is clear, and you don't have your telephone ringing and your secretary going, "This client wants to see you," and hurry up, and you're just, you and. It must have a certain spiritual
no question about it.
Yeah.
No question. It was an amazing. And plus, to be at the highest mountains in the world with all the religious traditions, and it was a combination of everything you mentioned. It was to be there. It was great.
Yeah, that would interest me.
Yeah.
I still don't know if I can make the quote-unquote trek.
No, it was a crazy trek. It really was. But
oh, goodness.
But I'd like to get. This is my first of many bucket list trips, Jack. I hope, and I hope to get to the Everest region at some point.
So you're ready to go back?
Well, not to Nepal. I'd like to go to Kilimanjaro next. Is my next goal, and then but I'd like to go to Nepal once more if I could.
Now
definitely.
The wife saw all these photos.
Yes.
She heard you.
Yes.
And did she say, "All right, I'll go with you the next time," or not yet?
I think she likes to hike, and she's a great horsewoman. She's great with horses.
Oh, really?
But
okay.
But she doesn't like the rugged accommodations. Let me put it that way. Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
you're with her.
Well, you know what? It's not for everybody.
No.
You can't see it on television, but I'm a little overweight, and it might be a little bit of a tough trip for me.
Yeah, no, but it was still something you would have loved, I'm sure.
Now here they're cleaning clothes.
That's how they had no washing and drying, and then you'd walk along the trails. They'd have these statues. This was an amazing place. This was Cogbenny, and that's looking into the Mustang regions. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mustang, but it's
just the Ford automobile.
Right, but this is from Mustang, where the horses come from, but it's very remote.
This is where the Mustang horse
the wild
comes
Mustangs,
from.
right? And they have some hidden kingdoms there, and you can see this is basically a
cute little
Buddhist school. Yep. And this is one of the
colors. Look at all the colors.
And the colors were amazing. That's what was, that was just, it was like a visual awakening. That's what I was trying to say before. The mountains in combination with the temples, and it was all together. It was pretty remarkable. There's the Buddhist yin and yang. Right.
Well, maybe this is why the people in that region seem to get along so well. They, it's that kind of area. There isn't a lot of...
Yeah.
And it's hard work for everybody, I'm sure. There can't be any easy work up there.
No question about it.
When you're at those heights and you don't have power engines and Jeeps and things running everything for you,
absolutely.
It's work.
Right, and in one part of this video later on, I have a few slides that talk about, Nepal is materially challenged but spiritually sustained. And because they didn't have all the affluence that we have, I sometimes felt, and it just seemed that they were in some ways more spiritually happy or closer to God in some ways than we are, because we have so much, but sometimes we lose track of things, Jack,
Well, then you sit down with them over coffee, they go, "You don't know the problems I have."
Exactly. It's all relative.
It's all relative.
There's no question about it.
Now, this is Mount Nilgiri, am I saying
Yeah,
it
Mount
correct?
Nilgiri. This is from Tatapani, Nepal, a beautiful mountain. That picture with the clouds used to be on
Look at these waterfalls. Aren't those breathtaking?
And actually, this is the one day of the trek we took a bus because it was basically a road, and we had to get off the bus and walk a mile because basically the waterfall had crashed through the road. You can see that.
Oh.
We had to walk like a mile to the next bus, but that's one day we took a bus. And being on the local buses was choppy. They were driving along these high mountain ledges. The driver was talking on his cell phone, smoking cigarettes.
They had cell phones there?
They had cell phones. Some of the people did.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. Some of the people. There's our Sherpa.
Wait, I'm going to ask you a crazy question. You're up 16,000 feet above sea level. Could a cell phone? Did you have a cell phone up there?
I did left my cell phone at home. Once you get to the cell phones work till about 10,000
Really?
feet if you had coverage.
Okay.
I left my cell phone at home. I didn't want to do that. You could buy a satellite phone. You could like pay for a call. I didn't do that because I wanted to have the time out on the trail.
But you could. But they had service.
You could. Some places you could have service up to
Isn't
about
that
15,000 feet.
Isn't that something?
But
did you bring back any clothes from there? Any locally made garments or anything that you found interesting?
What I did is I brought back a vest, and I brought back some prayer flags. I brought back a homemade leather vest, which I like, and then I also bought some handmade Buddhist bells that you could use as dinner bells or spiritual bells, and gave them to people. So they had a lot of craftsmen in Kathmandu and on the trail. So.
Now, I noticed in these photos we just had, you had two flags, Nepal and India.
Right.
So I'm going to assume that they have pretty good relations.
Right, exactly. And that particular photo we went through was India had helped them build that water project on the trail.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, generally speaking, there was a very good relationship between the Nepalis and the Indians. A little less so between the Nepali and the Chinese. You can see my Sherpa, he hiked with the Buddhist prayer beads. You see the prayer beads?
Oh, okay.
That's from my Sherpa. And this is about day 15 of the trek, and you see some of the beautiful mountains behind us. I think that's Annapurna South, or it might be one of the other major mountains. But you'd see horses, you'd see wild horses on the trail.
Now, are these wild?
Yes, I believe they're wild.
Really?
They may have been tended, but they were basically running free. They weren't in stables, let's put it that way. I can't say for sure, but I think they were wild.
Now, is this one of the inns you stayed in?
Right, this is in Ganjruk. This is, one of the places we stayed in.
Okay.
They had, sometimes they'd have little small museums next to it you go into and just see some of the things they were showing and stuff, so.
Oh, okay.
And then, the rooms we stayed at, they probably cost the equivalent of about $3 US a night. The
big
price,
spender.
Exactly. And the dinners might be $4 US.
So you didn't feel at all financially violated by any of these hotels or anything?
No.
They sound very inexpensive.
Very inexpensive, no. But, you get what you pay for, too, Jack.
Well, but whoever heard of $3 for a room? I mean, maybe for an hour. But,
no, I know. That's true, yeah.
But really, so they were that inexpensive?
Very inexpensive. But the Sherpa did all that. We paid a lump sum, and he would make the arrangements.
He arranged all this for you?
Correct. He gave us an itinerary, and that made it better because, he just knew where to go, and I think it helped to have a guide. It really did.
I'm sure. So. You could never do this without a guide.
There are a few intrepid people who do it without a guide, but most of them were in their 20s. Like the average age
out there. What do you mean? They don't bring a helper with them to help carry the food?
No, they just backpack. When I backpack, I usually just carry my stuff. I carry a 50-pound pack.
Yeah, but in a place you've never been and have no idea.
And going that high at 18,000 feet. No, I'm glad I had the Sherpa with me. It was a good decision, yeah.
God, I went deep sea fishing a couple of weeks ago. We had 3 on the boat to help me. Mrs. Barron reeled in a 40-pound fish. She was really excited.
That's
but the guys were there to help her and help us, put the bait on it. Yeah, I'm not a... I wouldn't be climbing.
Yeah.
Or if I was, I'd have a whole group helping carry me up there.
Yeah. No.
But so really, some of the young kids go with just the backpack and.
Yep. They do.
Wow.
But the average age of the trekkers actually doing the trek we did, the full 150 miles, was probably 25 to 27 years old. We were the old time. We were in the top 10% of the group. I went here for my 50th birthday, but I was in the top 10. But, we were in good shape, and we fought our way through it. So.
Do you hear stories where they say you shouldn't come after a certain age, or...
Basically, my Sherpa said on occasion he's had to basically short-circuit trips if people came in out of shape and stuff. So it can happen, but it's a pretty self-selected group. If you're coming up here, you got to have a confidence level you want to do something like this.
Okay, so this would not be just some guy who all of a sudden decides, I want to do it.
I think you have to be in shape, definitely.
All right, so this is...
On our way we're getting to the end of the trek. We're in Baratanti. We're working our way down now. We were up as high as 18,000 feet. Now we're probably down back to 7,000 feet, and we're working our way down to the end of the trek. And there's some pictures of daily living and still beautiful mountains, but we're starting to get back to the lowlands again. There's an example of a wooden bridge, you ask. That one's a combination of wood and metal, I think. There's a suspension bridge. But
now the weather had to change dramatically.
Exactly.
We're seeing bananas.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. You went from a jungle climate all the way up into a very alpine climate.
Red Sox hat.
Right. That's our celebratory beer at the end of the trek. There we are in the last town, top Satopani, I think is the name of it. So, and we're finishing up, and you'll see.
Oh, even the colors change. That looks almost like, you know, almost a little bit Cape Cod-like.
Exactly. Yeah, well, maybe. You can see some of the quotes I have, but I put into the video. But you can see those boats, those colorful boats.
Yep.
Those boats were all leading into a Hindu temple, and they would go and see the little island. Yeah,
yes.
and you could rent a boat and go out to the island. And people made offerings of flowers, of grapes, you know, fruit, and different things like that. But it was very interesting.
The weather was much warmer. It looks tropical.
15 degrees, 20 degrees warmer than up high. I was up high, and even in early to mid-October, it was 20, 25 degrees at night. Here it's probably, you know, up to 80 degrees in the day, 70, 80 degrees.
Here they're playing soccer.
And that's Pokhara, Nepal, it's called. We're into basically the city. We actually took an airplane back. And they have a beautiful museum dedicated to all the mountaineers who lost their lives.
Oh, just for what I want to see.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But they call it the International Mountain Museum. And it was a beautiful museum, and they had...
Oh, this is quite modern looking.
Exactly, that's a very nice, and they have certain pictures you'll see of some of the different cults. That's called a Mandela prayer wheel, and that's made by the Buddhists. This is all stuff that they pulled off of Mount Everest, all basically trash. That they have expeditions that go up there that take some of the trash off of Mount Everest.
Really? Why? Because so many people leave?
Yeah, so many.
How can they do that?
I think that's wrong. But major expeditions have gone up there and left their oxygen bottles, their climbing ropes, and it's basically, you know, you go to Everest, you think you're going to a place of solitude, but it's like a refuge center. So they're trying to move some of that off, you know. But this is talking about.
Did you find a lot of trash on this mountain?
A lot less because we were not quite as high, but there was still some. I was picking up trash as I was going.
Really?
But generally speaking, the people were respectful, but I saw, you know, in some cases, some of the people living there weren't always respectful.
You mean the actual people who reside in the area?
Yeah, they'd have a candy bar or something, they'd leave
just really trash it.
Yeah, and that bothered me. But,
well, I can understand that.
Yeah.
That would bother me.
Yeah.
Here you're in a, you know, in your vision of, you know, sanctuary, and
right.
they are throwing, you know, candy wrappers all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, that would bother me.
It was a lot less than the Everest area, I think, but it was still an issue.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh my goodness. So you finished the trip, you've come through this town, you're getting ready to come back to Boston. Fill me in. You got a ride to the airport.
Right, so what we did, you'll see in a couple days, we got back off the trek, you'll see a couple more pictures, and then we basically spent another day in Kathmandu touring around. So Nepal has 10 what they call World Historical Sites by UNESCO. It's a UN agency. Yep. We saw 7 of them, so that was awesome in our short time there. We saw 7 of the 10 World Historical Sites. So we did another couple days of touring. Then we took a flight went to Hong Kong for 2 days of R&R.
Okay, tell me a little bit about how it's quite a change, Hong Kong from Kathmandu.
We did R&R. We stayed in a hotel called the Panda Hotel. It's controlled totally by the Chinese now, the Chinese communists. But it's still a city of commerce, and we went around to some of the major sites. You know, we went up to the top of the Cable Hill and some of the famous things that you do. We went down to the harbor.
Took the Star Ferry probably over to Kowloon.
Exactly. We did all that, and we had a couple of nice meals, and it was just
the food is good in Hong Kong.
Food's a lot better than Kathmandu. That's
you
for sure.
finished your lentils and rice.
Exactly, and we needed some decent food at that point for sure. So that was a nice thing to do. And then after we spent 2 days in Hong Kong, we flew back from Hong Kong back to New York and then to Kathmandu. So,
back to Boston.
Back to Boston, I should say.
Nepal is many things.
Right. This is one of the things that I did in my video to kind of show a little bit about Nepal, because basically I wrote this little poem on the trail. So I said trekking in Nepal isn't creature comforts, all right? And it isn't good hygiene. And my videographer, Mike Lammy, helped me do this. And it is an underground sewage system. There's only like 15% of the place has underground sewage system. It isn't good food. I had to put that up there. You agree with that?
Okay.
Yeah. It isn't clean water. We had to still purify our water.
Now, when you say purify, what do? You bring like a Brita faucet?
No, you have special purification tablets.
Okay. All right.
It isn't freedom from illness. It isn't a luxury vacation.
So far, you're not selling me too.
No,
well
I'm gonna be selling you something. Anything decent in the bathroom. The bathrooms are very poor. There was no flush toilets at all. It was choppy bathrooms.
Terrific.
No hot or warm showers.
Julie, I understand you're not going.
Exactly. And then you'll see in a couple minutes, it isn't bedrooms with light, but you're going to see in a minute what Nepal is, and this will be a couple slides out. There's a couple slides as we're getting high, but there's a quote, but I'll show you in about a minute. We're going to show what Nepal is, and you'll like this, Jack, because it shows some of the awesome scenery and what it meant to me. And I'll tell you in a second. You'll see this. So that's a famous quote from the book that inspired me to go there, called Annapurna, about the first expedition of Nepal.
No, this is a great trip.
Right.
This is something you'll always talk about. And it's okay when you tell people the food was lousy. And
Right, now here we go, but I say it's hiking in the land of Oz. It is hiking in the land of Oz. It's White Mountains on steroids. And trekking is U.S. hiking times 10 in terms of the difficulty and challenges. Breathtaking natural beauty. Hiking in the home of 8 of the world's 10 highest mountains. Hiking amid mountains that are more rugged, peaks that are more jagged, and summits that are more elusive, and rivers, gorges that are deeper and more knife-like, drop-offs and cliffs that are more precipitous and dangerous than anything I've ever hiked in my life. And at times it was a dangerous journey. This was a construction site accident where a couple people died. They were building a road. We talked about the political unrest. Where there
is an Islamic issue there.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I mentioned. And they had some major natural disasters. They had like earthquake, rainfall, storms. They had that airplane accident I mentioned the day before we got there, the day we got there, actually. Remember the bus trip I told you I took? Some of the buses drove off the edge of the road and people were killed. But I still say it was hiking in the high Himalayas where the people of mountaineering pushed themselves.
That's what I like too. I like the holy site.
Exactly, and the holy sites and the temples and new thoughts and perspectives and spiritual journey. And I love this final, one of the best 3 weeks of my life.
Oh,
all right?
See, you left there with that.
That's how I felt.
I'm going to tell you, I got the perfect person for you to go on the trip with, your son.
Actually, my son and I would enjoy a trip like this, and we've done a lot of hiking together.
I got to tell you something. If he's a Iraqi, I don't know if he's considered a veteran yet because he's still in the military.
Yep.
But he'd be ready to deal with this.
And he would. And he and I had a lot of awesome times when he was growing up hiking, and we'll do it again.
But this kind of thing he could do.
Absolutely.
And he'd say, Dad, I've seen worse than this.
He would. He would and he could. And I hope to take a trip like this with him down the road.
But that would be I don't know your daughter, but
Tabitha, yeah.
But this would be a good trip for you and your son.
So this is part of the video where I'm just quoting different things about, parts of my trip. And again, I put this video together. I decided I was going to do this, and I actually showed it at the Framingham Library, and I'm going to be showing it at the Appalachian Mountain Club.
Oh, they'll enjoy that.
Exactly, and it has music, which we're not showing here. But, this is where I talk about materially challenged and spiritually sustained, how it's still a very poor country. The income is about $1,200 per person a year. Again, only 30% of the people use improved sanitation. Only 16% of the people get vaccines.
They only live to 67. That surprises
exactly.
me a little bit.
Yeah, because even though they're in better shape, they have more health issues, and they have very few roads. That's a quote I had from one of my books, and I could see that because we were hiking for days and we saw very few roads. But I say most of the Nepalis are spiritually sustained, and that's one of the things I saw on the trail. Just they were closer to the earth. I'm not going to read this whole quote, but basically the theme of it is that because they were closer to the earth and they were just living in a more simple fashion, I think that they had a more tie-in to spiritual truths. That was one of the things I saw over there, Jack. So that's one of the quotes.
I wouldn't doubt you on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt you.
Yeah.
But it's a hard life.
It is indeed. It is.
I can just see, honestly, Chris, I just look at the land, how barren it is. Westerners have everything that money can buy, and they still want something that you can't buy with money.
Yeah,
you can't buy everything with money, but it helps.
No,
that's what paid your airfare to get there.
Good point, Jack. Good point.
But you look at the topography, and you can see how hard it is to, as you get higher, to grow vegetables, to grow fruit.
No question.
To create food.
Right,
and,
no question.
You're dreaming. You can't just go out every day and say, oh, gee, I hope I catch a wild sheep today or a wild yak. You got to develop and domesticate cattle or whatever, sheep, and grow food. And when you have that kind of land, It's very hard.
No question about it. No question. It was a pretty...
Well, this has been a terrific video for me. I usually leave one of these sessions and I say, gee, I got to put that on my list. I want to get going there. This one I would definitely go, but I have to find a little different way to see it, because there's no way I'd be coming back down alive, climbing 18,000 feet in my particular situation.
Yeah.
But with thanks and gratitude, let's see.
And I just...
To my co-trekker and fellow adventure, John Petrini.
Yep.
And he made it back.
And there's my guide, Nawang Sherpa, who reminded me to go slowly and enjoy the journey. And there's our porter, Lolly, who had a great smile and was very helpful carrying our stuff, which was a huge help. And Michael Lammy, a kid from BC, who helped me create the video. He did a great job. There's my family. There's Julie, Sean, and Tabitha. Yeah.
Great. You have a handsome family.
Yeah, to my friends and clients who supported this spiritual adventure.
Thank the clients who helped pay for it.
There's my law firm, Petrini and Associates.
Wonderful.
And then I talk about Nepal a little bit. It's only the size of Tennessee, actually. And it's the shape of Tennessee. And it's wedged between China and India. And, as I mentioned, it has 8 of the 10's highest mountains. And we hiked around 2 of them. And as I mentioned before, we visited 7 of these 10 amazing historical sites, these old temples. And they made us feel at home. The people there were very nice. I think they could tell I was there for the right reason. I never had a problem. And in honor of my video, I made charitable donations to a couple of charities, including Room to Read, which helps fund school education in Nepal, and school construction and girls' education.
So these were very specific
exactly.
to Nepal.
In fact, I met this guy, the first night we stayed, he was a school teacher at a Room to Read. And same thing here, to the Sir Edmund Hillary. He was the guy who first summited Mount Everest.
Yep.
And his charity funds the Sherpa people in terms of development projects they want to do. And I have a little quote here, to whom much has been given, much is expected. That applies to me and to you. And that's it.
Thank you so much. It was I really did enjoy it, and you're a very good guest. You explained everything beautifully, and on the next trip, you got to promise to come back and be with us again.
I will, Jack, and I thank you for your hospitality, and thank you so much for having me.
if your wife wants to call me for support to say, I understand why you don't want to go, I won't blame her.
All right, I'll tell her that news. She'll be surprised. So.
Thank you again, Chris.
Great. Thank you, Jack.
All righty. Thank you, folks.